Recording now, right? We're not live.
Hello and welcome to our first fall camp edition of the Burnham Brothers College Football Podcast. My name is Pat Burnham, and I'm joined by my brother Shane. And we are sorry we are late. Actually, we probably should have aired the last 25 minutes as we've tried to get on the air live. This is our second live show. And we had some technical issues, and it's been fun watching Shane try to work some of those issues out. But, hey, we are here nonetheless. Shane, you got your microphone, you got your earphones, you got your background. You ready to go?
Growing pains, but we're ready. I'm excited.
Yes.
Do I sound like in stereo here today with my new mic? Do I sound good?
You sound more like a radio DJ. And it does make I can't wait to get my Shure mic because it does make your voice sound richer and deeper and more professional. So, yeah.
What's the saying? I got a face made
for radio
and voice made for print.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah. Episode 5? Here we go.
We are back with episode 5, brought to you by Home Instead of Tallahassee, Ascension Football, and the Mallory Law Firm out of St. Augustine, Florida. And Shane, listen, it's our first fall camp edition. Florida State's in camp. The rest of college football teams are in camp. The sun's a little brighter. The grass smells a little greener. The anticipation of the start of the new season is here, and kids are practicing. We're going to get in a little bit of Florida State's media day yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit about the offensive line at Florida State and the importance of that position group and some of the things Herb Hand said yesterday or Tuesday at the media day for the Florida State coaches. I spent about 10 minutes with Coach Hand. We're going to talk a little bit about Mike Norvell's decision to continue to ban the media. And also we're going to talk a little bit about one of our favorite players growing up, Ryan Sandberg, who passed away earlier this week. And we, both Shane and I, will tell you about our affinity for Ryan Sandberg and why that was a sad passing as we all get older. All right, so Shane, football-wise.
Football starting, all right?
Yeah, football is starting.
Worth mentioning today is the Hall of Fame game, all right? So I'm going to go back Tallahassee, Florida, circa 1985. I don't know if it was televised back then, but I feel like it was. Again, I don't know when this thing started, NFL doing the Hall of Fame game to kick off the summer football. But, man, I used to love this game. I'd be playing over the top. I'd have my helmet on, my pads on, jumping on mom and dad's bed. But I felt like even as a college football player in camp, and maybe it started earlier back then, I don't remember dates. But, man, this was a huge day because it was real football. Somebody was playing a game. Somebody was getting dressed out, and that meant you were closer to it. Yeah, what a great day.
I mean, somebody's going to get cut from this. Somebody's going to make the team because of what happens tonight, all those things. Football finally matters again. Talking season officially over, and we got the Chargers and I believe the Lions. And listen, if you're a Florida State fan, you're going to get to see what DJU looks like with a competent offensive line because he is going to take, I believe, most of the second half snaps for the Chargers. So
they don't play. Veterans don't play anymore. They really don't. They used to play, and work their way up to maybe even into the second half. I don't think they even see the field now. These one guys.
No, I don't think you're going to see Justin Herbert. I don't think you'll see guys like Derwin James or any of their frontline players, to be honest with you. But it is football. We'll have Mike Tirico's voice. I think he's with Collinsworth. Is that their crew on NBC? I think NBC's got it. So yeah, but football's here. There's all kind of stuff going on, all kind of press conferences. I've been trying to keep up with Alabama and Auburn, and listened to Mike's press conference last night, the one I saw in person. Listened to his post-practice press conference. But let's get into that a little bit, Shane. Obviously, my first question to you, I don't know about you, but the grass smells different this time of year than it does any time else. Does it ever seem that way to you? Like, to me, cut grass just smells different in August than it does any other time of the year. Now, when I was playing, that same smell made me want to puke because I knew what was fixing to happen for the next 30 days, which was 2-a-days and sometimes 3-a-days, depending on who, college or high school. But yeah, so
fresh cut grass and fresh dew in the morning on your shoes. Take me back to morning practice, AM practice, high school, college as a coach. It takes me back for sure. No doubt about it.
Do you miss the anticipation? Like, I miss kind of the nervous anticipation you have, the 72 hours out before camp. When I was in football operations, my biggest concern was, is everybody going to report on time? Did everybody get the messages? What coach is going to be calling me saying, hey, so-and-so's not here yet, or I haven't heard from him. Mark Schneider did that to me one time. But anyway, I think it's a fun time of year. I think everybody's jacked up. Everybody's 0-0. Whoever your favorite team is undefeated. And
yeah, it's one of those fun things about coaching. I felt like every year, you hit reset almost. Certainly you get judged on those Saturdays, those 12 Saturdays, but you have a chance to reset. It's almost like a ribbon cutting for those guys yesterday. And the building has been under construction since January, right? They've been building this thing for a long time. But you cut the ribbon yesterday and you get a chance to open up fall practice. But yeah, certainly a great, hope, anticipation, all those things, anxious about what you got, anxious about the work you did in the summer. So certainly you're ready to kick it off as a coach and see what you got for sure. And we sit here and talk about counting schedules and wins the other day, overs and unders. As a coach, right, you never do that. You're convinced you're going to find a way every week. And obviously that's a tall task, but you're convinced you'll find a way somehow to outcoach them and outplay them.
Yep. Yeah, that's the way it is. I mean, I don't think that in my 7 years at South Florida, I don't think we ever went into a game thinking that we didn't have a chance to compete and take team. Even the Floridas and Alabamas of the world, when we played them, we didn't. We felt like we had a chance to go in and pull an upset. We didn't feel like we were ever going to be outmatched. Of course, in the Big East, and I don't know what conference we were in when I left South Florida. I think we were still in the Big East. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, long story short, we always felt like we were in it, coming off a good year, coming off a bad year. We felt like we were going to capitalize on the year before if it was really good, and we felt like we were going to redeem ourselves if that season was really bad. And I think that's what Florida State. I think that's probably Florida State's mentality. And let's get into it a little bit, Shane. Can you? I mean, you and I are football people, and we kind of understand. You probably better than me understand Mike Norvell's mindset. Can you imagine that he's ever been more geeked up for the start of a season than he is this year, coming off last year?
No, the bad taste in their mouth. They've had to sit there and hear about it and be asked about it over and over. This couldn't get here quick enough for Mike and those guys. Could not. I would imagine this is probably the most, outside of maybe his first camp as a head coach, when I'm sure you're starry-eyed. This is probably, as much anticipation as he's had or anxiousness as he's had about going into a camp, I would imagine, in a long time.
Yeah, listen, a lot to be anxious about. Got 40 to 45 new kids on this roster between freshmen and portal players. I think 6 new full-time coaches. I do want to ask you a question about that as regards to and you and I talked a little bit about this. I can't remember if it was off air or on air. There can be back in the old days before the portal, if you were coming off a bad year, you were still returning most of that team, right? The only guys that were coming in were the 15 to 25 freshmen that you signed. So most of the guys that were going to play for you still kind of brought that energy or brought whatever their resume with them that they've had from the year before. Do you think that bringing in 20 new portal players and 6 new coaches on Florida State staff, does that kind of give them a built-in sense of amnesia from what happened last year and maybe have a little bit more confidence going into this year?
100%. And I'm going to go back. You talked about new team, 40 guys, most of them here in January. Some, I guess, getting here now for, I say now, they've been here since June, but get into camp. That's one of the other things about being in camp. You get to play with new toys, right? Guys you've never seen play outside of what they've done in their shorts, running around. In some cases, these guys are enrolling early, so it may not be the case, but new toys to open camp. And I think, amnesia, surely they don't. I thought that when Tommy was speaking, when they caught him on camera talking to the Alabama guys, and I really don't care what he said, but he said I had to get those guys or my guys some confidence. And in my mind, okay, he's talking about the guys that were here in the past, right? That are trying to forget last year, but he didn't feel affected by it, right? He's confident. So to your point, I don't think those guys will feel it. It won't be as heavy, as the guys that were here and had to live it, certainly, and be on those long bus rides and plane flights home and those long Saturday afternoons.
Yeah. So I think if you're a football fan, Florida State football fan, you look at that schedule. I think that you ought to be fired up with anticipation. I don't think this team will repeat what it did last year. We got all month to talk about that, why we think that. I do have a couple things. Were you surprised? Now I know some of this. I'm not going to say all of it. I think part of the decision to go yesterday afternoon at 3:30 was Mike's very specific at the practice times and who they're playing, right? You see him do that, have scheduled practices for the opener in years past. He's always had if it was a 7:30 kick, he's always had a couple 7:30 practices. But they did start practice at 3:30 yesterday, and they spent most of the day outside, according to what Mike said in the press conference and what I've read from some of the beat writers around the program. Do you think that was intentional? Do you think that we're going to see a tougher Mike Norvell as far as when they practice, how they practice? Will they be more physical? Will they tackle more? Because this was a very soft football team last year, and there's no way around that. And can you in your 6 years, Shane, put your foot down a little bit more with your squad? And can you do that? And maybe you got more flexibility to do that because of the turnover in roster.
All right, I'm going to try to get the 3 things there. You talked about, obviously, being physical in practice, 2 or 3, can you put your foot down? And then your first question, I think I'll start backwards. So, yes, you certainly can try to put your foot down. I don't think it ever goes well. I think kids, you start soft and then you try to get a little more strict. I think they're trained up in the way that you've brought them up in the program. So I think that's really hard. You end up getting inconsistent communication, inconsistent standards, and that's hard for a kid. So it's hard to turn the wick up. I think you got to be consistent, whatever that wick is. If you're a 3 or you're a 10, you got to be that for those kids. So I think it's hard to do, especially when you've been in a place for 6 years. As far as getting physical, the way you practice, there's a lot of ways to be physical, even today's college football. And I get it. The rules have changed. You can't have a board drill. You can't be in Oklahoma. There's limited contact and the number of days you can go to the ground and the number of days you can be in shells. And there's all these restrictions. But there's still a way to be a physical football team. And if you can thud, which for you guys who don't understand that terminology, if I'm in practice and I got a frontal shot, not from the side, not from behind, I'm going to step up as a defender and put my toes on your toes, my hips on your hips, and then I'm going to run through your face. And then not wrap up, let you go, and everybody else within tag, tempo, punch at the ball. All right, those things have to be happening at practice. And if you don't demand that, you certainly are not going to have a physical football team. So he's got to demand that from his coaches to hold those guys accountable, that they finish in a thud position, that they're physical, that the backs and the receivers run through contact, and understand that's how you would develop calluses on a football team. Yep. And whether it's that or even the physical nature of your drills, your individual is where you train guys. If I'm a D-line coach, that's where I set our work habits, our toughness, our mindset. So all that can be affected by how you structure your practice, how you hold guys accountable within that practice. And then the mindset and the heat. I've been some guys who discount that altogether. Some guys who it's very important to. We're never going to go inside unless it's extreme cold, extreme heat. Right. And then I've been with some guys that kind of ride the fence. I'll say this. There is something about being in the heat. I think as a kid growing up under the tower, watching Coach Bowden build these teams at Florida State. They used to love to drag guys in here on the road from road opponents coming in here, and they'd melt. And they talk about that being their secret sauce. So I think you can, shared suffering is real. Pushing guys and developing a mindset that we can and we will push through that is real. So I think Mike sometimes leans on the science, like a lot of coaches, inside, outside. Let's take care of their bodies. There's a lot of ways to do it, but I do think being outside, as long as you're being safe and practical with all the, medical stuff that's out there, which they would be, yeah, put them out in the heat, and got plenty of time nowadays to recover them. It's one practice a day. The nutrition and all that is through the roof as far as support and what you should be able to do with these kids. So I'd say get out there, get in the heat, and test them.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of practicing in the elements. And listen, I think that's because a product of my generation. I think that's probably you're right behind me. I think you feel the same way. But I remember working for Skip Holtz, unless it was lightning, we were practicing outside. We were always going outside. It could be a monsoon, but he said you never know when we're going to play. We play in Tampa. We get a thunderstorm at any time, September, October, November. It's just the way the weather is there. I do think that the heat, battling those conditions makes you tougher. I was surprised to see several teams. Saw USF. They started out their first practice indoors. I just assumed that Mike was based on what we've seen in the previous years. But yeah, I'm all about. Listen, I understand that you got to be safe.
Sure.
There's no, don't want anybody to be seriously injured because of it. But I do, you talk about Florida State back in the day with Coach Bowden, and I remember Michigan State had a really good team with Dan Enos at quarterback and Andre Rison at receiver, Lorenzo Wright at running back, and who was the Tony Mandarich at left tackle. And they came into Tallahassee on a September day and absolutely melted. I remember that game like it was yesterday. In fact, I think I was a freshman in college at Sanford, and I came back that weekend because I'd already blown out my knee and was already on crutches. But anyway.
Well, the truth is, I'm going to go back to Florida State fans. This will be raw for some of you, maybe not. But I remember sitting here watching Coach Taggart after their loss to Boise State, if I remember, and about hydration. But here's what's great about college coaching. If you're a college coach, right, you wake up in the morning, the kids come in, you're walking into your calf, and you got full service calf and whatever they want. And there's 3 or 4 nutrition folks there watching their plate coaches. Hey, do this, do that. Make sure you're taking care of your body. As they leave the locker room, so an hour and a half later, we meet, we tape, they walk out. There's something waiting for them as they take the field. We take a break, like Coach Bowden would. We just take a break halfway through. Nowadays, we have ice boxes. If you're at Florida State watching practice, those kids hit a giant ice box to bring their temperature down for 5 minutes. And again, come off the field, and there's hydration tests before and after. So even if a kid's low, right, it's you're aware to it and able to watch. So to me, you should be able to push kids actually, right, in a very safe way outside. The guy who, again, worked for a lot of guys, I thought all of them were trying to pay their own, attention to it however they wanted to. I loved Heupel when we were at UCF, hot as it can be in Orlando. We're going to be outside for 3 days. On the 4th day, we're going to go inside. And the kids always had it. It was a nugget. They looked forward to it. It was a great day. Day 3 was better because they knew day 4 was going to be inside. Day 5 was better after day 4, so to speak. So
give him a carrot.
Give him a carrot. But he was a guy from Oklahoma out in the Midwest, and he was going to embrace the heat. So everybody looks at it different. I don't think Mike sees it maybe as a weapon, maybe as you and I talk about.
Yeah. Listen, we'll see how it transgresses during practice for Florida State, but I liked it that at least initially they were outside. They said they'd been training at that time during the after. They've been training outside all summer in the mornings mostly, but yeah, they've had some groups out in the afternoon. I think they did some OTAs in the afternoon. I do want to talk to you about that. They did get Herb Hand mentioned during my interview with him on Tuesday that they got 11 or 12 OTAs, organized team activities, and it's when the offense can work as an offense against their same thing with the defense. For people that don't know, take us behind the chains and say, how is that different from how practices were conducted before college coaches got the check, the install and all of that? How much has changed in the way you operate during the summer going into that first practice?
Sure. As far as I can remember, as long as I can remember, I should say, the NCAA gave you X amount of hours in season, what they countable hours, certain things count, certain things don't. But you had a limit during the season that was far exceeded the off season. In the off season, you had limited contact, if any at all, based on the calendar. So if it was outside of spring practice, and when I first got into coaching, and for a long time, you had very limited contact, and if it was in the spring semester and it was not spring football, that contact couldn't be football, if that makes sense. So fast forward, here we are, 2025. The rules have changed, and they've deregulated, I guess would be the best word for college football, and they allow, really, you have 4 periods now. I'm going to come in February prior to spring practice, and I'm going to have these off the OTA type workouts where we're going to part condition, part install, and group work, all preceded by a meeting where this install takes place. So you're going to get 8 to 10 of those in the winter portion of your program now, where you can go out there, be creative in how you drill and what bags you're allowed to use. But you're going to have these group settings to work it 8 to 10 times. You're going to repeat those 8 to 10 in the spring, maybe a little more detail, but still large, conceptual pictures. You come out in the summer, like Herb's talking about. Hey, we've had 2 of these already. Now this is player led, with a lot of oversight at most schools. But now we're going through an install. We still get the meeting as a coaching staff. We still get to do the Indy as a coaching staff. Now we're leaving the field so the players can lead these OTAs. But in essence, by the time I get to camp, if I got here in January, Pat, I've now been through the base install 3 times. Right. I mean, and I've been through Indy, and I've developed. I know going into Indy here yesterday exactly what to expect, the coaching points, the terms, the technique, because of all the hands-on work that we never had it. When I played, and for a long time when I coached in the summertime, we might walk through the weight room and, hey, how you guys doing, Pat? We see you over there. Yep. We might be driving home, and all of a sudden, slow down around the track and, see who's out front leading the run. That's not how it is now. Right now, we get them. We touch them all the time. We meet with them all the time. So it gives a first-year crew like Herb and Gus a huge lead into what they're trying to get done in this 4th install period.
Yeah, and I think with the spring, as long as they have a post-spring portal window, I almost think that you've almost got to give them those 12 to 15 opportunities, because, I mean, the quality of football is going to be so much better since the NCAA is going to allow them to do that. Because if you didn't have that opportunity and you can only get those 25 practice opportunities once fall camp starts, I just think new kids, transfers or freshmen, trying to learn the system in that short 25 period practice period time frame, I think that it affects the quality of football. So I am glad to see they've allowed them to do that. Yeah, I would be fine with them allow them to do 7-on-7 and even some, not 11-on-11 in shorts, but 7-on-7. And listen, the kids are going to do it anyway, right? They're going to get together.
Those are the heavily observed, 7-on-7s going around where, you give the kid a script. Hey, these are we're working 2x2 today on offense, or we're working 3x1 quick game on defense. We're working, you get together as an offense, defense, and the kids have a script. This is what you're working today. So, and again, you're probably watching it from some vantage point where you're not supposed to be. So, yeah, I mean, it's just year round. It's like every other sport, I guess. Now it's gotten to where it's year round, and the kids never stop. And for some coaches, maybe that's a good thing. Some think it's a bad thing, because you used to get to enjoy your June a little bit, but it's just year round now.
And I'm gonna tell you what, between you got football season, then you go directly to National Signing Day, then you go into a month-long portal period, then you finish off recruiting the last 3 weeks and leading up to the first Wednesday in February. That's really a non-factor anymore for major colleges anyway. Then you're back into spring, then you're back into the spring portal, and then you got about 8 weeks between the end of the spring portal and start of fall camp, maybe 10 weeks. It does seem that maybe it's because I'm getting older and time is fleeting, but certainly seems like the offseason is quicker than it ever has been before. When I was in it, the offseason never seemed long, but being out of it and just covering it, some of these off seasons over the last 10 years have seemed rather lengthy. This one did not.
And I think if you're Gus, or if you're Herb Hand, again, it gives you a chance to get these kids not only with you, but when you're out on the road with today's staffs. If they were here in January, they're meeting with whoever that QC or GA or student assistant. I guess we always had some GAs, but now you got some senior level type QC guys who are behind, not on the road, meeting with these guys. And that's another layer that you didn't have before. You got really an on-campus position coach and an off-campus recruiting position coach. So it's more resources than ever, more development forever for these guys in the offseason, which should result in a better product on the field in most cases.
Yeah. All right. So let's get in. We mentioned Oklahoma and board drills earlier. And I do think there's one guy on Florida State staff, after talking with them on Tuesday, that would like to see Oklahoma and board drills reinforced, and that is Herb Hand, the new offensive line coach. If you watched me when I was with the Osceola and hosting and producing Seminole Sidelines, I have a previous knowledge. I've met her before a couple times on the recruiting trail over the years. Shane, I know you know her from battling for recruits. Our father, knows Herb really well. So I was looking forward to sitting down and talking with Herb because I truly believe, and Tommy Castellanos is getting all the attention, and he should. He's the quarterback, right, of Florida State. And we all call it the most important position on any football team, whether it's pro football, college football, high school football. But I really think the most important position group for Florida State and whatever success they're going to have this upcoming season is the offensive line. They were ridiculously bad last year. I remember I think it was 2019, when I thought the Syracuse-Florida State game was one of the worst played offensive line games from both sides I'd ever seen. That was topped only by last year's performance by Florida State on the offensive line. But there's a lot of reasons for Florida State fans to be fired up about this offensive line. You've got 4 transfers in that started at their previous colleges. All of them started last year. You've got Gunnar Hansen, the left tackle from Vandy. You've got the left guard, Adrian Medley from UCF. You got the center, Luke Pettibon from Wake Forest, and you got the right tackle, Micah Pettis from Ole Miss. Now, all those guys started last year. I believe Gunnar and Pettibon and Medley have started multiple years at their previous schools. And then, of course, you throw Richie Leonard in, who only played 4 games last year for Florida State. But I think, listen, you should feel better about the offensive line and what this quarterback and what this run game is going to be able to do. These are proven players. He was particularly high on Gunnar Hansen and Luke Pettibon. He described Pettibon as an alpha, a real dude, a sponge, leads by example verbally, and I want you to explain this to people. I understand what it means, and I know you do, because I remember you as a player, and you were very much this way. Not afraid of confrontational leadership. And he meant it in a very positive way, and he did not mean physical. I don't want people to think that. And Herb meant it in a very positive way. But explain what you think Herb Hand meant he said it's a dying art. And it's a lot. Shane would say, as I've told you many, many years ago, they're taking football out of football. And I think Herb mentioned that this confrontational leadership is a dying art. Tell us what he meant and why it's important that you have it, particularly on the offensive line.
I just think most kids, as most men that we sit across from, don't want to be disliked. And when you're willing to step out there and hold people accountable to the standard, which is what he's talking about, and comfortable making someone else uncomfortable, that's confrontational leadership. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be throwing someone against the locker. It doesn't have to be all that. Sometimes, when you talk to each kid on your program, you got to find your way to lead. You got to find your way to confront. Okay. And again, so to me, it might mean sitting down with a guy at lunch or at dinner and saying, "Hey, this ain't good enough, brother. Like, this ain't the standard in this room. It's not how we practice." It might be more confrontational than that, but it's hard to find. It's hard to find kids it's hard to find coaches in college football who make hundreds of thousands of dollars, who are comfortable, holding kids accountable, and you call it confrontational. But to me, it's a guy who believes in what he's saying. He believes in what the program's doing, and he's going to hold the line for everybody. And damn the torpedoes, damn the consequences. And I think I worked for a guy, my first job ever. I won't say his name, but he tells a story. He had a teammate he played with, and he didn't care for him, and he confronted him on it. And anyways, never could see eye to eye. And fast forward years later, he still can't care for the guy 40 years later. But it's hard to find guys that want to do it. Most people want to go with the flow. So I think.
Well, and what dawned on me when Herb said that is the 5 years, this is going in. I think this is going in my 7th year covering the program. I can't remember, 6th or 7th year covering the program. Started back in 2019. So I think that was Willie's last season. So
Sure.
so this will be my 7th year covering the program, and the loose capacity that I am covering the program this year. But what dawned on me when Herb said that is Florida State has not had a guy like that, at least on the offensive line, in the 6 previous years I've covered the program. And I started to think about, had I ever played on a team or worked for a team that didn't have one of those guys in high school, certainly that was not Jay Jackson. You didn't want Jay coming to you to your locker and having a talk after practice or during practice. In college, it was Leland Allen, the starting center that I backed up at Sanford. You did not want to have a problem with Leland. You did not want to be confronted with you wanted to make sure that whatever you're doing was up to the standard that he had set, right? Because those guys were the alphas in those rooms.
I'll go back to even here for Florida State fans here locally. We were 2022. I want to say Tatum Bethune had joined us from UCF. He was with me and Randy there and came with us, I think, the year after we got here. And I remember we were having that 3-game losing. I hope my timing's right. We're in the middle of that 3-game losing streak in 2022. Mike does a little accountability run for penalties on our Sunday practice. So we lined up to run, and there was some grumbling. And I remember as Mike was addressing the team, Tatum stood up. Tatum Bethune stood up, and he's a 5'11" guy. He's not the biggest guy, but he confronted the team, hey, about the message Mike was sending and challenged the team. That's confrontational leadership. It wasn't, I'm going to beat you up, but, he put the truth in their face. And I'll go back, up front, even though I don't know how they played as a unit when Mr. Gibbons transferred here from Notre Dame, correct?
2021.
Okay, so he was a guy in that room that was beat up, maybe couldn't do everything, but he held guys accountable. And it, I thought he did a good job up front. But yeah, it's hard to do, and you need somebody. Again, we talk about player led. On the defensive side, when I was there, Fisk, Verse, Kier Thomas, who we got from South Carolina, who was just a hit in that way, and Tatum Bethune, a transfer, who was a hit in that way. So, there's guys who got to be willing to do it, but it's hard to find. It really is.
Yeah, well, listen, if you're a Florida State fan, you got to be. And listen, if you go to the Burnham College Football channel on YouTube, I have turned that into a clip where he talks about Luke Pettibon. So please go to you're on it right now if you're watching this on YouTube. But that's in our video library is the little 58-second clip I have. And then I've got a 10-minute clip of my whole interview with Herb. And another reason I think Florida State fans need to be – go ahead, Shay. I know you want to say
I just want to add on Luke, and for Florida State fans, he's come from Wake Forest, which in my opinion might be the best coach offensive line unit since in the 3 or 4 years I was in the league, watching teams across. Now it's a new staff there, but the staff he played for, and you go back and if he's running the show for that group, which he was at center, he's calling the protection, he's pointing the scheme. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's really well coached. He's been developed, high IQ, Clausen and those guys. So I would be excited just knowing where he's coming from. Then obviously to hear Herb talk about it, doubly excited for that guy to run your show.
I don't know that I thought Herb was going to be as effusive with praise as he was entering camp, but there's no doubt he is fired up about Pettibon and Hansen. And he talked about Hansen really twitchy and very impressive. He's been very impressed with him. Listen, like I said, all 4 of these guys, none of those 4 guys played less than 760 snaps. They played over, I believe, 3,500 between the 4 last year, or right over 3. It was over 3,000 between the 4, and that should make Florida State fans feel a little bit better because your top returning lineman, if you were playing with what return, your top guy would have been around 300 snaps, and that is Jacob Rizzi, who's going to be a backup this year. Now,
I thought that was the mistake they made in the portal. My last cycle there, we took a lot of guys who had measured right, recruited highly, but maybe had not produced at their previous stop. Hopefully they've corrected that, right? His evaluation, hopefully his influence. It sounds like maybe he's, righted that ship, but. I mean, tape matters. I mean, you got 300, whatever clips it is, 500 clips a piece of guys playing college football at a high level and major college conferences. So the evaluation, as long as they got that right, they had plenty of tape to watch it on.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. I felt like I was talking to an offensive line coach on Tuesday, and I spent 10 minutes with him. I think Nee was in there part of that interview, but I felt like I was talking to an offensive line coach. Listen, we understand how hard it is to go through a season without injury. One of my biggest concerns is depth for Florida State across the board, but particularly on the offensive line, because you have almost no experienced depth behind these 5 guys that are starting. So I asked Herb, and you won't get straight answers from a lot of coaches, but I said, who are the young guys that have shown up since you got here and have continued to impress you through the spring? I think everybody's going to be real fired up about this one. Lucas Simmons. He mentioned Lucas. Lucas is the prototypical NFL tackle. He's 6'7", 6'8". He looks the part. He's beautiful to look at. He said he had a great spring, took advantage of all the reps he got, and he is expecting Lucas to take that next step. You've coached against Lucas in practice. What are your thoughts on Lucas? He was a really raw kid when he got here, right? He played in a flip-flop league down there on the beach in high school. This is his first real football. He's only been playing for 3 years. Big-time football. What do you think about Lucas?
International guy, right? So, football, maybe not his natural. Been playing it for a long time kind of deal. So, new to the game. So both those guys, had them on scout team when I was there as redshirt freshmen. So they don't like Coach Burnham a whole lot, I don't think, because my job was to make sure we got the look we desired. But Luca he played left tackle for us on that team. Otto was playing everywhere. But, super talented. We talked about Darryl and some of the measurables on Darryl Jackson. He's a freak that way, and the measurables and the length, at tackle, right? He's so long, his ability to keep guys off him. And if you want to run around him, he's so large, you got to take cab, it costs cab fare to get to the quarterback if you go around him. So, but you knew it was going to be developed, big body, had to catch up to all that in the weight room. Storms and those guys do a great job. And he doesn't lack toughness. I'm not saying he was a mauler out there as a redshirt freshman, just kicking versus ass. I don't mean that, but he was a competitive kid. A little bit surly, which I like sometimes, though, lineman, where Otto's the kind of guy, he's going to knock you down and pick you back up and say, hey, man, good job. I'm going to do it again next play. So 2 different personalities where I think Luca, he'll probably, he's not going to help you up. So I don't know. Really excited about both those guys. Just I can see. I keep coming back to why you want to be at Florida State, because you get to work with those kind of bodies and you get to recruit those kind of bodies.
Yeah. Well, I was fired up to hear him say Lucas, because I was an open-ended question. I didn't ask him, hey, how is Lucas doing? The other 3 guys he mentioned, Andre Otto, who, listen, as you said, one of the best kids you'll ever meet in your life, extremely athletic, well-rounded guy. I remember when I was working for the Osceola, we did something called Reeling Them In, which is a recruiting show I did with Charles Fishbein, and we had Andre on the show, and we had to catch him right before he went to work at his job in Key West, was working at an ice cream store. And of course, he wants to be in filmmaking. He's a very well-rounded kid, but and a guy that I thought would play more last year than he did. But I'm excited to see that despite the frustration of last year, he has still kept the hammer down, according to Coach Hand, and is another guy he's impressed with.
I know you see guys like Francis down there at Miami who comes in there and plays as a true freshman, but I think it's of all positions, more so than even D-line. I think at D-line sometimes you can get around with just being athletic. Just the learning, the development, from the technique point. I think 2 years, let him bake. So to me, I never thought a kid, until he became a redshirt sophomore in our program, going into his 3rd fall semester, okay, now, let's find out what we got. But it's a slow bake. It's a developmental position. And, it might be better than they weren't out there last year. And maybe they have no PTSD.
Well, Andre played a little bit, but not a lot. Now, the other 2 guys he mentioned did not play hardly at all, maybe 3 or 4 snaps. Jonathan Daniels, who, boy, in the spring, he looks the part. Now, he does not have ideal tackle height, 6'4". I know everybody wants 6'6" tackles, but he is 6'4", got extremely long arms, and boy, he is pretty. He mentioned how impressed he was with Jonathan. And then the other kid, who I think is going to be at a guard position, is Jaden Todd. Jaden, listen, I think I think he was going to be a developmental guy all along. Again, going back to what you said, he is going into his redshirt sophomore year. It's about time for the light to be coming on. He needs to be a serviceable backup this year. If everybody stays healthy, but he really needs to be ready to take the step the next year. And he's a kid that played baseball, is a really good baseball player, came out for football, I believe, his junior year, had a great year, and has really come back in and kind of reworked his body since he got here. And so, you've got Herb, feels pretty good about. And the other thing, and we did get asked this question the other day, Shane, what is the difference between Herb and who was the offensive line coach here last year?
Double A, Alex Atkins.
Alex Atkins. Difference between Herb and Atkins. Philosophically, the one thing that Herb did say on Tuesday is he's not a big rotation guy. He mentioned that when he played, he didn't want to share reps with anybody. Alex and Mike, up until the middle of last season, were always, hey, we want to be able to rotate 7 or 8 guys through that offensive line. I'm not a big fan of that. When you work with somebody next to you long enough, you kind of have a feel for what they're going to do naturally, right? Sometimes you don't even have to make the call. You just kind of look at each other. You know where they're going to be when a guy's in a certain technique or playing a certain with certain kind of leverage. So I think that is probably the biggest thing I took away in answering that question, is that he's going to put his best 5 on the field, whoever he thinks those are, and he's going to roll with them. They're probably not going to come out. I kind of like that philosophy. It reminds me of old school football. It was back when the depth chart meant something, right? You walk in there and your name's first or second or third. And
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
As a young player, like you said, Florida State, Coach Bowden, you walked in there and you looked up, and if you made the first line, it's like Latimer in the program. I made it. I'm at the table, and I remember as a player at South Carolina, same thing. You're a 3 when you get there, or a 4, whatever the hell you were. Over time, you work your way until you make that first line. Now in college football, this is where I talk about grown men not wanting to hold guys accountable, and maybe it's the portal, maybe I don't know, but a lot of places they hide the depth chart. They call them the A's or the B's, the Reds versus the Garnets. And I'm not saying that's what Mike does, but in a lot of programs, they hide. I don't get it. You're always being judged. You talk about, I want to see how hard edged they are, how competitive. Whether that's Mike or anybody else. Okay, then that's losing and winning right there, being on the 1 line. So
right.
Versus the 2 line. So that always bothers me.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but at Florida State, during Coach Bowden's days, when Dad was coaching here anyway, you remember how you lined up for stretch, right? The first team offense was the first 11 guys across, followed by the first team defense, followed by the second team offense, followed by the second team defense. So you lined up for stretch in depth chart order. I think it should serve as motive, but you're right. And Mike's not the only one that does it. I look at depth charts from across the country, and when they announce, yes, it's not only do you have the ors, you also have, hey, we have 2 starting running backs, even though we're at 11 base personnel, right? So Florida State announces 2 starting running backs and 2 starting tight ends on their depth chart. Even you can't play with 13. You can't play with 13. So
at some point, you got to sit down with a kid and be honest with him. Sometimes maybe I was too honest, I guess. But yeah, again, I think it's funny. There's a lot of grown men across college football who don't have the ability to have a really tough conversation, I feel like. And again, there's a lot of reasons, I'm sure, right? Placating kids.
This could turn into a rabbit trail. We're talking about how
I'm not trying to go, but I will say this. Play 5. I love play 5. Bill Durkin up there at Liberty and Jamie Chadwell do a great job. He had the great O-line at Coastal, right? And he and I were talking this summer when I was up at Liberty, and he has the fist, is what he talks about with his guys. And there's 5 guys coming together as one. Yep. He doesn't believe in playing. He'll play a guy if he has to, if they're beating the crap out of somebody. But when it's crunch time, Billy's going to roll 5 for all the communication you're talking about, working together. And so it's kind of like when at quarterback, if you're playing 2, you don't have 1, right? The same thing up front of the offensive line. If you're playing more than 5, you probably don't feel great about your 5.
Yeah. And listen, if Florida State plays the way they should or we're used to, you should be able to have some opportunities this year, particularly in those middle games, those middle 2 games in September, East Texas State A&M and Kent State, you should be able to play some guys, figure out what you got, get them some game experience, and hopefully you got a couple ACC games like that. But yeah, so we got to ask the question philosophically, what's the difference? That's probably the biggest difference that I've heard between those two guys. I like it.
I think there's not a whole lot of different schools of thought up front, right? I mean, there's a little bit different how whether you waddle off the ball, whether you run off the ball, a la Iowa. Maybe how you deliver your punch, but whether you're galloping to your double team, it's whether you're B blocking on the backside and scooping through the backside defender, they're all going to train them the same way. It's not the what you're doing, it's how intense you're doing it, right? And how urgent the guys feel to respond to that coaching. So I guess that'd be the difference to me, is not necessarily what he's coaching. Right. From a technique wise, but how he's coaching it, like, how he's getting it apart, how he's motivating guys, is that through the bench? Is that through, pushing their buttons the right way? But to me, I guess philosophical, I think you probably will see that play out in how he trains those guys and how he deals with them, every day leading up to the season.
Unfortunately, we have not been able to see Herb work with the group. Obviously, Mike banned the media from spring practice. First time in his 6 years that he's done that. So I can't answer how he is in approach with his players. I do know from what I've been told, the players have responded positively to whatever he has asked of them. And I've heard he's very demanding. Unfortunately, we won't be able to tell you any of that this year for multiple reasons. A, I'm not on the beat daily anymore, and B, practices are closed. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. But I do want to take a second out to thank Ascension Football for sponsoring today's show. Ascension Sports, where athletes rise above the noise. Whether you're navigating NIL deals, building your personal brand, or preparing for the next level, Ascension Football provides tailored consulting to help maximize every opportunity on and off the field. From recruiting insight to pre-draft prep and everything in between. Learn more at ascensionsportsconsulting.com. Shane, you handle Ascension Football for Ascension Sports Consulting. Where can people find you?
Let's go at Shane Burnham 52. Any questions about Ascension, you can find me there.
And that is on the Twitter/X machine.
And Instagram, on the gram as well.
Yeah, I forgot you're a grammer.
I'm on the gram as well.
I'm on the gram to follow your daughters and my other nieces and family. All right. We also want to thank Scott and Todd Harrell from Home Instead of Tallahassee. At Home Instead, their adaptable care plans give you the confidence of personalized help that's with you throughout your day. Even though we know there are plenty of things you still want to fly solo on, like finishing your daily crossword puzzle, or trying Aqua Zumba, or watching baseball, also known as hogging the remote. We'll provide companionship when you need it and space when you don't, all with a smile from qualified, compassionate caregivers matched to you. Please visit Home Instead online for a better what's next at homeinsteadtally.com. Again, Home Instead of Tallahassee at homeinsteadtally.com. We also want to thank the Dan Mowry Law Firm. Dan is a former teammate at Tallahassee Lincoln, and
38 Trojan Trail.
38, that's right. And he has a law firm over in St. Augustine. The Mowry Law Firm, headed by Dan Mowry, specializes in car and truck accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death cases. Dan's team of lawyers bring over 50 years of experience with them, and they can be reached at 904-824-7799 or MowryLaw.com. Again, the Dan Mowry Law Firm or the Mowry Law Firm, they can be reached at 904-824-7799 or MowryLaw.com. All right, Shane, speaking of free speech, we're going to get, I don't have a lot to say about it. I'm only going to speak to it because it's different than what we're used to around here.
Right.
When Mike first got here, and there's been a lot of back and forth between the guys that cover Florida State. There's been a lot of tweets at him about, hey, we're glad you got kicked out of practice, this, that, and the other. It's great when they don't have any content to read. About 2 weeks from now, they're going to be wishing that the beat did have, because all they're doing is taking Mike's press conferences and the coach's press conference and regurgitating what they said. So there's not any analysis. But listen, to me, this is not a big deal. I think, first of all, what's that?
I wonder again. I don't know what people want to read about. It's practice. There's not much to say really to me. So I'm always fascinated at the amount of coverage they want to give practice. And I thought Mike, when I first got here, I was blown away about the amount of access Mike allowed. He allowed more access and was more media friendly than any head coach I've ever been around. And I've been around some guys that were good to media, but I really thought Mike was as open and as good and as clear and honest with those guys. And I don't know if he got burnt last year, or what led to this. New staff might have different thoughts.
Yeah, well, I definitely have heard some of the new staff had different thoughts. I've definitely heard that. Listen, at the end of the day, Mike did give us unprecedented access, and you got to thank him for that. And listen, it doesn't really affect me anymore, so I'm probably less upset about it than I would be otherwise, because there's nothing more I'd like right now than to have a dip in my mouth down at the Dunlap practice facility watching this team practice, but I can't do that. Now, the optics of it coming off the historically bad season look bad. I really don't think Mike cares what anybody thinks, to be quite honest with you. Nor should he. It's his program. He can do what he wants to with it. The only reason it looks bad is because it is happening after the bad season, and he didn't kick us out after the 13-1 or 10-3. None of that. So to me, that's why it looks like kind of the take your ball and go home thing. But listen, I'm sitting there watching television last night, and I'm watching something on the Dallas Cowboys, and it's when Jimmy Johnson famously found a TV clip of the Bills practicing the shuttle pass before the Super Bowl. They have not run the shuttle pass all year. They went back and broke down the film. And, of course, they famously ran it 3 times in that game. All 3 were either tackles for losses by the Cowboys or turnovers. So I do get it that, I would have – and listen, I'm not a current member of the Florida State media. Shane and I are doing this for fun. We love football. I'm not I may get credentialed, I may not. But my long story short is I probably wouldn't be at practice every day anyway. So I don't really have the thing that I liked about it is I didn't go around and take a lot of, I took notes. I didn't want to write a story off practice. I just wanted to take notes. I wanted it more for background. As someone that would, if I'd been a member of the media this year, I would have liked to reach some kind of compromise. Well, hey, we're not going to write practice reports. And by the way, practice reports, listen, I think some of the practice reports that were written over the course of the last several years are over the top. I told our guys, listen, we don't need to write a story after every practice. It just needs to be bullet points.
Yeah, but everybody else is doing it, so you feel like you have to. Yeah. I understand. It's there's a whole cottage industry, and I guess that's why we're on here talking about it. I don't get it. I don't get the obsession and the people that want to A, cover it that way, other than they're making a living doing it, and B, the people that are buying the content, because really it's a guy made 2 plays inside. Yay, a guy made some plays in one-on-one. Yeah, the guys watching it and covering it, no offense, they have no idea whether it's stuffed or blown for the most part.
Right.
And I'll say this, it can work against you. I've been places, again, we talked about spring film. There are people that if the media are there, they're going to have a buddy. They're going to ask, they're going to send a high school coach, come watch. And, anytime you have access to your practice, whether it's media, whether it's high school coaches, whoever it might be, people are going to try to get that. I've been places where there were media allowed to a preseason camp. That film ended up on our system. Not only did we watch it, we put it on our system, which is your video system to watch and rewind and break down. So, the biggest thing I could probably gain out of that is, read your reports and find out who I think I'm going to see as a staff, who's the matchup, who they playing at X. I don't know. I don't think there's a whole lot given up really by the staff for allowing people in, but there are certainly people who try to take advantage of that.
Well, yeah, listen, to finish my point, I do wish that there had been a compromise. Like, hey, we're not gonna let you into every practice, but we're gonna let you into 4 preseason practices, no practice reports. You can only ask about what you see in the post practice media session, or hey, kind of like LSU does it, right? Brian Kelly does, at least 2 years ago, did not allow the press in for practice, but did allow them in for scrimmage. The 2 scrimmages they had previous to playing Florida State. Something like that where there's no stories. I would have been fine. Hey, let me in. I'm not going to write anything. I just want this for background once the season starts, right?
There's a great example, Brian Kelly and those guys at LSU. So we're playing them, new quarterback with Jaden, right? We go back and watch Arizona State tape. I mean, we thought we had a very good idea of what we thought Jaden Daniel was based on the previous tape we'd watched at Arizona State, going back and defending them with their new offensive coordinator who had been at Cincinnati. And, nothing changed. I mean, so that you can close camp, but we have all that tape to go back, and you're not going to change that much, if you're a play caller. Nothing's changing that much. So, again, I don't understand why everybody makes such a big fuss about it. And then at some point on game day, you're going to get a new formation. You're going to get, something you have to coach on the sideline. And so a lot of that stuff, it's there for you. And at some point you're going to break a tendency, and we got to defend it, or adjust.
Yeah. Well, it got some of the practice report stuff is a little silly. I can't remember who it was. It's been 3 or 4 seasons ago now. But you were on the staff when this happened. But you know how they made the media sit up there on the second level of the baseball stadium, and you guys would go over to the defensive field to do team, and you've got the tower sitting in the middle of the 50-yard line. So it's the angle, and between the angle and the distance, it's very hard to see anything that really happens. And I can remember walking by somebody because I couldn't see it. I was like, well, I'm going to wait till they come back to this side of the field before I watch anything else, because I really can't see anything. They're not tackling. I don't know what's going on. And so they're running a zone read play, and I don't remember whether it was a pass off of it or not, but it was a zone read RPO type play. And there's a guy from the media telling the guy that he works with that the quarterback should have either kept it or thrown it based on what he has seen from 200 yards away. Again, the guy has, and so I think that's, if you want to, they start reading these reports and people are trying to say somebody's making a mistake in how they're reading the defense, how they're reading the front, how they're reading whatever they're supposed to read. And I was like, I played football. I coached football. And I happened to stop in my tracks when I heard what they were talking about and watch the next play. And so they were trying to break down who was making the mistake, who wasn't, and there was no way for those guys to know. So anyway, and as Jeff Cameron and I've said, once you get past a certain point, everything you need to know is going to show up on Saturday. What you need to see, what you need to know is going to happen during game time. But listen, he has shut it down for whatever reason. I'm not upset about it. I think it's worth talking about because a lot of people are. But at the end of the day, I think it's just so different from what he had done in the past that it's kind of struck people the odd way, the timing of it, new staff, bad season, all of that. But I do have to say this, for people that don't understand, he gave unprecedented access for 5 years. And because of that, the people that cover the team this year do have a good point of reference heading into the Alabama game. And who knows, maybe he changes his mind and lets everybody in for a scrimmage before the season, before preseason camp ends. But anyway, just want to talk a little bit about that since there's been an uproar on social media, both pro and con against for it against it. But
I can't see a con. I can't see a negative. I mean, I can't see one negative.
From Mike's standpoint, you can't see a negative.
Yeah. As a program, I don't see one negative in closing practice at all.
Well, I was thinking about this last night, Shane, and I wrote this down. Do people that cover practice talk to their friends about what's going on?
Sure.
At practice, sure. I mean, it's human nature, right?
Sure.
Do they talk to reporters that cover other teams? I don't know. I don't know.
Listen, information is clout in today's society. A lot of people think info is clout, and some don't. Some do. but as a coach, you're not sure who it is, and so you can't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
You can go back to Dave, not Dave Clawson, or maybe it was Dave. I think it was Grobe. Wake Forest, the play-by-play, the color guy was a former quarterback, was now a play-by-play for the university. Made his living off the boosters that supported that program. He was upset about something. Tommy Elrod maybe was his name, and shared allegedly some playbook, information and some plays. So, it's hard, and coaches are notoriously paranoid anyway. So, like I said, maybe some of the new staff members have experienced that. But yeah, as a coach, and from a coach's perspective and as a player's perspective, like I don't want you there. It's one less distraction.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was hoping they'd reach some happy median somewhere where they get a couple in. Now, listen, if I was still a part of the full-time member of the Osceola and Rivals, I would be so disappointed because I didn't listen. I took notes. I watched Inside, which was really not Inside, so it was really hard to figure out who's doing well and who's not because there's no full speed running back. They're not tackling. Same. 7-on-7. I mean, not 7-on-7. Pass Pro, I think I got some good indication of who could play off of because Pass Pro was live, right? I mean, it was the only all-out drill between the offensive and defensive line.
Even that one,
Pods is pretty competitive.
Yeah. But even that, even one-on-one pass rush, right? Like if you're observing that, D-line 3 technique counters goes inside the guard, and what a great rush! No, I mean, it looked good there, but in the game. That quarterback just escaped and he's scrambling, or the defensive end
who don't know what protection's going to be called. Yeah,
right. So even that, it's like one-on-ones, DB and wide receiver. I just put so little stock in that, and it's just. But I get it. It's again 24-hour news cycle. People are trying to, have their websites and things and
content.
I think it's foolish.
Yeah, well, listen, I hope Jerry and Bob don't get mad, but I said a couple times, guys, we got to cut back on the practice. I mean, they should be notes. It should not be a story. It should be a note.
But again, I guess if your competitors are doing it, you feel like you have to, right? I don't know.
Oh, it's monkey see, monkey do. Just like out there taking those stupid pictures of the recruits as they're rolling in for weekends. You can't talk to them. You're simply there to beat the guy next to you. To a picture on Twitter. It's one of the most insane things I've ever seen. And I'm disappointed in a lot of things that are going on right now. But one thing I'm not disappointed on is not having to cover recruiting. Because
I couldn't imagine just coming to practice every day. Like, just as a coach, right? I mean, you understand the value of practice and you understand Tuesday and Wednesdays and Thursday. Every minute's valuable, but even you're ready for Saturday too. So I just can't imagine. Golly, that would be boring to me. I couldn't do it.
Well, I love preseason. I love going to preseason practice, particularly the padded practices. Now, I don't give a crap about a shorts practice. It is what it is. I didn't like shorts practices as players. I mean, it's not football with shorts on. And by the way, not only at Florida State, but on every NFL team, every college football team, if you went on the Twitter timeline, there's going to be so much overreaction to what happens in short practices. It's almost humor. Like, guys that don't know football by what they post on Twitter about practice and about this guy looks this way in shorts. It doesn't mean anything.
No, football in your underwear does not matter at all. It means nothing. And I think too, going back to the physical practice back at the start of this podcast, I know Mike has mentioned, creating a guy with edge, I don't know if you can create that. I think, Bear Bryant said it best, he was born a winner, right? And I don't know. I compete with my wife. If we're driving home in separate cars, and there's a good chance I'm going to not cut her off, but I'm going to try to win, right? Like, I don't believe you can create competitive, the winner and the loser. Okay. Yeah. If you put me in a win-loss situation and I lose, I'm not sure if you're going to teach me to hate losing more because I lose. I'm just going to get probably numb to losing. I don't get that. You go recruit that. And make every situation in your program competitive. Do it. Make everything you can competitive. Make there a winner and a loser. But you cannot create a desperate edge. You can't. All right. That's got to be born into you. That's got to be how you vibrate, your wavelength, however you want to describe it. You cannot create competitors. All right. They're born that way with a natural bend to compete in everything they do, or they're not. And so that scares me because I don't think that's something a coach can do.
Yeah, well, I think that's got to be who your players are. I agree with you on that. I mean, if your players aren't naturally competitive, you're not going to make them competitive. I think winning's either important to you or not. It means something to you. I hate. Well, of course, now practices were always tough in the olden days, and I'm sure they were tougher for the generation. But hey, I remember, Shane, when you lost a game. You were going to pay for it in practice. So there was some built-in motivation to do well, but I can also remember in high school winning a game handily, and we played on a Thursday, so our Friday practice was running I think we ran 10 10s, 10 20s, 10 all the way to 100 yards. I mean, it was crazy, but I don't think you can make people competitors if they aren't already willing to compete once they get there.
I thought what Bobby and those guys did, and you're talking about the Gassers and some of the things that the guys in the Florida State program, when they came back when I was at Florida State, and we talk about the good old days, and we talk about Sunday night practice, and every time, or even on the fall camps, spring camps, every time the offense scored, you ran. And they'd also motivate you. So, there's a carrot in front and there's a whip behind. And there's got to be both. And it's got to, but there's got to be some of it. But my point is, you can have all that in your program. You can have every piece in your program. You can have all the unity, but if you don't recruit good character kids who are willing to be good teammates, or you don't recruit competitors who are just born that way and just bent that way to compete in everything they do. And again, I'm not saying that means you're always going to get along. When you get a bunch of those kind of people together, as you and I saw as kids, or I've seen across programs, or even Verse a couple of years ago at practice, you may not get a lot done sometimes because guys are so busy competing that it gets outside the line. Those are all good problems to me.
Do you remember how competitive those what they call that, the dynasty years? Do you remember how competitive the staff was against each other, the offense and the defense? I mean, you had competitive coaches, and I think that helped breed competitive players. They saw the coaches going at it. Hey, we're going to go after it too. But yeah, I think
that was coaches back then. The coaches were getting different time. Coaches were not making big money. They were in it for in most cases to compete their butt off, and maybe weren't on their P's and Q's as much because they weren't worried about losing as much. So it's different. Again, everything's changed so much with the money that's come into it and the exposure and the eyes that are watching.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap up the football portion. We got one more question. We got a question.
Okay.
Per the ACC Media Days preseason poll, where is FSU projected to finish? The ACC Media Poll, Chuck, has them finishing 7th in the conference. Quickly, Shane, I think they're going to do better than 7th. I've got them 4th to 5th-ish. What do you think?
I agree. Better than 7.
You think it's more 4 to 5?
There's just so many question marks that these guys have not played together on offense or defense. But I'm going to fall back to roster. I still think it's a better roster than 10. Then that would put them only ahead of 9 or 8 teams in the conference. Whatever. Yeah. No, they're going to be better than 7th.
Yeah.
And again, I'll give Gus the success he's had, and I think Tony will be able to create, even with some non-superstars on that roster. I think Tony can create.
Yeah. All right. So this has been a weird 2 weeks with people that we've grown up with passing away. And of course, we got the sad news the other day that former Chicago Cubs second baseman Ryan Sandberg had passed away. It's first of all, it reminds you of that you're getting older. That's right. One thing that hit me is, hey, I'm only 10
years. That my colonoscopy 2 weeks ago.
So, listen, when we moved from Beaumont, Texas to Phoenix, Arizona, when Dad went from Lamar to the USFL, we got WGN and TBS. Mm-hmm. And I think we had TBS in Beaumont, but we did not have TBS we did not have WGN in Beaumont, but we had it in Arizona. And so when you got home, and I was huge, I loved baseball. Baseball was my favorite sport growing up. I was pretty good at it. Probably should have continued playing it, not football, but story for another day. But I love baseball. I could watch baseball. I could play baseball. I ate it up morning, noon, and night. So you get home from school and you get to catch the last 4 innings of the Cubs home games because every Cubs home game was on WGN. And at that time, they were all played. If you're of a certain age, you're not going to know this. There was a time in history where the Cubs played every home game in the daytime. They didn't have lights at Wrigley Field until sometime in the 90s, and I think even those were temporary lights they brought in for special games. But anyway, so you and I grew up around watching Ryan Sandberg and Jody
Sean Dunston
and Andre Dawson. Tallahassee's FAMU is Andre Dawson, who I've got
the Hawk.
Baseball for. Yeah, the Hawk.
The Hawk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great because, like you said, first of all, you're on the West Coast, so you're already behind time. The Cubs are on Central Time, and of course the Braves are on Eastern. But you could go back to back. You could watch Ryan and all those guys and Harry Carey singing, and it was awesome. And then you could come after that if you wanted to watch the Braves, even though back at that time they weren't quite the Braves we got to know in the 90s.
Stone in the booth with Harry Carey. You had hey, listen, my Mike Snyder, when he got married, what he gave all the groomsmen was an autographed Andre Dawson baseball that I still have down in my living room right now. But listen, that was I don't want to listen. I'm not going to make it like I got emotional over it, but it is weird when guys that you look up to start passing away. And he seemed like such a great guy, and he was so fun to watch play baseball. And that team, because they had their breakout year in 1984. That's the year he won the MVP.
That's right.
He had gotten traded to the Cubs from the Phillies, and before the 83 season, they did not do well in 83. Then they took off like a rocket in 84, and what was a special year for the Cubs. And I don't think he made the what I did not realize the other night is he won 7 silver sluggers in his career. Yeah. I did not realize that.
Unbelievable. And then you think about him, almost a Del Murphy, Kirby Puckett. I don't know if that makes sense. They seem like these classy dudes. Yeah. That played the game with a certain class and certainly excellence. But, yeah, a sad day, 65 years old. Not very old.
No, it's younger every day, buddy.
Yeah. It's been a tough couple of weeks for, kids of the 80s, right? And hopefully, somebody told me Phil Collins was in hospice. I hope that's not the case. We talked about Ozzy as pregame music. Phil Collins loved that guy, loved Genesis. So praying for him. Hope he pulls out.
In the air tonight, for whatever reason, still reminds me of Florida State football on a Saturday night. Now I know they used to play it in the stadium a lot back in the day.
They played it during a stretch.
Do they?
No, they did. They played it when we were kids. Right. Now, I don't know what they played during flip drill, but when Bobby would do the flip drill,
it also reminds me of rolling around in Ronnie Andrews' 280 ZX with the T-tops. Because he always had that kind of music going on. But anyway, Ryan Sandberg, that was sad. That was sad to see. Speaking of Andrews, we've got something I think is going to be, particularly if you're a football nut, you're probably going to like it. If you're a Florida State fan, you're really going to like it. If you're an Alabama fan, you're probably going to like it. So as I mentioned before on this podcast last week, Coach Andrews, Mickey Andrews, and our father, Wally Burnham, were one of 4 guys that we know, that I know of, Billy Sexton being the other one, former Florida State running backs coach, and Bobby Johns, a 3-time All-American at Alabama, were the only 4 guys I know that played for Coach Bryant and coached for Coach Bowden. So somehow, some way, we have been able to convince our father, Wally Burnham, and Coach Andrews to sit down with us next week and talk to us about Coach Bowden and Coach Bryant, their experience with both of those men, the similarities between them and the differences between them, and what made them who they were, which are the 2 greatest head coaches in college football history. I'll throw Saban in. Saban would be number 3. He's probably number 1, but we'll go with number 3. But anyway, so we're gonna have Coach Burnham and Coach Andrews on our show next week. Sit down and talk to them, and then we're going to get into a little bit of they work together at Livingston University, which is now West Alabama, the University of North Alabama, the Arizona Wranglers of the USFL, and then for 9 seasons at Florida State. So we're going to get into a little bit about Coach Bowden, Coach Bryant. So if you're a football guy, football lady, and love the history of the game, we're going to take you back a couple of decades and talk about my two favorite football coaches, which are Coach Bryant, as you can see behind me, and then of course Coach Bowden, who I love to death. I remember running into him when I first moved back to Tallahassee, Shane, and I'm at the Sing store in the front of Killearn, and of course I hadn't seen the man in years, and so he gets out of the car, and I say, "Hey, Coach," and he goes, "Hey, buddy," and like he always did to everybody, but he recognized I was a Burnham, and he goes, "You're a Burnham. I just don't know which one." So we're going to talk with Coach Andrews and Coach Burnham. What's that? What'd you say, Shane?
I said, "Hey, buddy. Yeah, I got great memories of Coach Bowden. I used to get hired by Miss Ann. I used to go hang their wreaths."
Yeah, I got to go cut their grass a couple times, and of course, I always had to go back to make sure I didn't miss a line. You know how Dad would check our lines when we were done cutting his grass, and if you couldn't miss anything. So so we're gonna talk a little bit about Coach Bowden and Coach Bryant with those two guys at some point next week. We'll probably post those probably Wednesday of next week. We'll sit down with them on Monday. So we'll be back. But all right, so we're going to wrap it up. We've been on here an hour and 15 minutes. Again, we want to thank Home Instead of Tallahassee, Ascension Football, and the Mowry Law Firm for their sponsorship of this program. If you have not subscribed to the Burnham Brothers College Football channel, please do so. Please like it, subscribe to it, and sign up for notifications so that you will know when we are doing one of these live or tape, but you will certainly get a notification. And we enjoy it. It's always fun to talk ball, and we're glad football season's here. And we will see you the next time on the Burnham Brothers College Football Podcast. Thanks for joining us.